right into this very important conversation. Without further ado, so welcome back to our online audiences. Now the second half of the program starts now. I want to invite you guys right now to submit your questions. If you have any thoughts, any comments, speak to us on Twitter. The handle is NOC_culture. Facebook and Instagram, your handle is at Networks of Culture. That's Network of Culture. So if you guys have any thoughts, comments, anything, use the hashtags, speak to us. We definitely want to hear your comments for our distinguished panel at the end of the conversation. The hashtags that we're using currently, hashtag KNOC, hashtag Connect the Dots, hashtag Networks of Culture. All right, so let's just jump into it. So if you guys are new to the High Key Link Up and the KNOC, you may be curious about who and what is KNOC. So let me break that down for you. The KNOC is an activity of the European Union, that's the EU, and it is a funded project. Now the cultural relations platforms of the Service for Foreign Policy Instruments of the European Commission's Brussels, Belgium. It's a project that directly supports international cultural relations and cooperations between European and global cultural and creative sectors. Now the KNOC is gathering, elaborating, and disseminating research on creatives' presence in Kingston, Jamaica, and what their added value is. Now, let me just jump onto this panel. Pre-pandemic research conducted by the British firm Nordicity and the Jamaican Business Development Corporation indicated that 49% of creatives are individual artists. Now, these individual artists and creatives are also known as independents, freelancers, or professionals who work for hire, many as part of the informal economy on transient irregular projects and contracts within the gig economy. Now, let me just throw some facts at you. 71% admitted to earning just over 1 million Jamaican dollars per year. That's 5,705 euros. 95% of respondents indicated that they earned under $4 million per year. 35% of creative and cultural businesses earn less than $200,000 per annum. 24% earn less than $200,000 in personal income per year. Additionally, 76,000 creative practitioners lost direct and indirect jobs and opportunities for work due to the pandemic. Now, many are still not working, and those that are active have barely been earning since before the pandemic. Now, this panel brings discussions surrounding the status of the artist in a pandemic environment and post-pandemic environment, and also reflections of issues of access and the protection of Jamaican cultural and creative outputs. Okay, we are so very pleased to welcome, firstly we have Kerry Ann Henry, Vice Principal of Edna Manley College of Visual and Performing Arts, and also Ballet Mistress of the National Dance Theatre Company, that's the NDTC. We also have Miss Janine Coombs, is an independent artist, also known as J. Cool. Yes. Finally, we have Mr. Pierre Lamer, former Dean of Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts, and a renowned theatre practitioner in his own right. Now, our moderator this afternoon, again, we welcome Stephanie. All right, Stephanie, I'm going to throw over to you right now. Get into it. I'm excited.
Excellent introduction and such deep context. Thank you so much, Nisha, to kick off this very important and urgent conversation that needs to happen. And just to set the context, that this follows a focus group session that happened 2 days ago with representatives from various associations, public and private organizations that have members that really started to delve into some of the considerations surrounding the status of the artist. Now, all around the world, there are unique challenges to the artist. Their work is not seen as their own work in many regards. Their ability to have decent work, opportunities, representation, a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. The idea of value is constantly evolving and debated in the most fundamental ways. As well articulated in UNESCO's Culture and Working Conditions for the Artist, at the heart of the cultural and creative industries are people, artists and creators who innovate, challenge norms, inspire and entertain. Their works generate new social energy, confidence and engagement that can improve the everyday lives of people. Their innovations and creative expressions drive development processes that can widen people's choices and inspire them to imagine alternative futures. As such, the cultural and creative industries can contribute to the promotion of peace, democracy, human rights, fundamental freedoms, gender equality, and the rule of law. Now, we're going to come back to some of the guidelines that are outlined in the UNESCO, the framework on status of the artist that has been developed by UNESCO. But before we do that, I want to make reference to this important engagement that we had on Tuesday with focus groups. And Carrie-Ann was the co-moderator for that session. So Carrie-Ann, if you could summarize for us some of the main points there, that would be.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. And hello again, everyone. It was such a rich conversation, you know, so I wouldn't be able to do it justice, but I'll do my best in trying to bring out some of those salient points. It was a varied mix. We had visual artists, dancers, musicians, educators, administrators, you know, right across the field. And they spoke quite a lot about the health of the ecosystem for developing talent. So what's that ecosystem around developing talent? And they spoke about a team around that talent development. Coming out of the conversations as well, there's this interesting thought and concept of, is there a model that can be created to have a sustainable framework for the artists? They made reference to one for track and field, that they think that there's a formula for track and field. Yes. Is there such a formula for the artists? So that was quite interesting. Another interesting point brought up from some of the visual artists' perspective is that there's a need for almost a space for these kind of alternative economies that are not directly monetarily driven spaces, and a discussion on the policy direction that there's a feeling that it's so focused on monetization that there needs to be room for other aspects. So that was quite interesting. The role of digital. So you had a session earlier that spoke about digital. So NFC and crypto and, you know, all of those areas that came into discussion as well. And tied into that was the thought on education. So education in terms of skills and certification and that kind of training, but also education on the environment, the current environment and future environment that artists are actually operating in, and the need for them to be aware of and understand that and be players in that. They spoke to the increasing need for artists to understand the business of their art, you know, and not necessarily to the managers, because they spoke about artist managers, but having that understanding. There was a feeling that the artists who had that business sense actually tends to be more successful. So, you know, we'll see that. Yes. Education, as I said, and educational institutions, that was a significant part of the discussion as well. And speaking to institutions playing a bigger role in the recruiting and grooming of talent, you know, so being very deliberate about that, and not just the artists themselves wanting to pursue, but, you know, having actual recruiting elements to it, publishing and rights. And they spoke about not only the artists understanding that, but it coming into the education system from early, you know, primary, secondary, having, you know, those kind of conversations. And the support structures, so unions, what regulations, the roles of unions, setting up unions, lobbying with government, access issues, models for the mobility of artists. And I'm going to round out with the discussion had on value. So there was the question of, do artists know how to value their work? And what does that value mean? And how does the consumer receive that value? And is there the need for also the education of appreciating the arts in and of itself, so that that value is not one-sided? It's a two-way kind of interchange, you know? So yeah, it was quite, I'm sure a lot more will come up, but it was a quite engaging conversation across the various fields.
Excellent, excellent, and well put. And something that stood out for me in that session was this notion of the precarity of the artist. You know, it kept coming back, vulnerability of the artist in the space. With COVID, this was so exacerbated. And, you know, one of the beautiful things about having Janelle Jeku on our panel is that you're a young female coming up in this the music business, in the music world, you know, emerging artist. What does this mean to you? How do you feel vulnerable? What are you feeling? And tell me a little bit about your story.
Well, I think vulnerability comes naturally being an artist. You know, I mean, I think when we express our art, when we write, when we sing, when we perform, that is just vulnerability. That is us expressing ourselves and telling our stories and telling other person's stories. So I'm just one of those persons, and I'm very happy to be one of those persons. It's hard work. Yes. It's a lot of hard work, and it takes consistency and determination and support. Yes. A big support system. From many angles. You think it's just family, but friends are involved, family blood and non-blood is involved, and fans, definitely, and just all the support all around. And just for people to appreciate and be open towards, for myself, in music, different genres of music, to be open.
What genres? Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, your music aesthetic, and just so we get to know you as an artist and understand, you know, we're dealing about value considerations, and, you know, so it's important to know you as an artist.
Yes.
And how you even value your product.
Oh, okay. Well, I do a fusion of music. Well, when I first started doing music, I was trained classically. From high school, and then I went on to Edna Manley College to expand in pop and jazz. But from whenever I was little, I was always interested in sounds. You know, I'm like an audiophile. I just love sounds. And so I would always take different person's CDs, at the time, cassette tapes, all these things, listen to the radio for anything that was fascinating and interesting. And so this developed me to just love sounds, you know. And so when I reach high school and I'm learning classical, and I'm learning about classical and being exposed to jazz and all these things, it has influenced my music as well. And then I started to be drawn to an alternative sound when I started to learn the guitar and write my own music. And in this aspect, I decided that I don't want to be in any bubble. I am free. I'm a free person. So I have come up with this fusion thing. But to be marketed, you have to put yourself in a genre to go on the Billboard or to go on Spotify and all these things. So I decided, okay, where does my music fit? I'm a Jamaican. I should be doing reggae. But I do reggae as a part of my thing. So that's my culture. That's naturally for me. But I also am drawn to alternative and jazz, and I have this smooth voice, but I can also sing classical, which is unusual for some people. And so I just said I want to fuse it all together and create this hybrid sound.
Yeah.
And I think it's going well for me,
Yes, and you see, when reflecting on what UNESCO has in terms of the guidelines, because I'm going to constantly be referring to this, one of the things is protect the freedom of expression of artists and recognize your right to form your own genre, and in this space, and how much room is there for that in our ecosystem and with the ideas that we have. Do we all fit in one mold? And is the education system allowing for this kind of freedom of expression? But we can come back to that because the first thing that comes up in these guidelines is to recognize the important role of artists in society. And I want to open the floor to Pierre here, because Pierre has been doing some very interesting work with theater and, the social fabric of society. And I want you to bring that to life for us so we can, see some of the implications of the work you are doing.
All right. For me, theater is really linking with the people. And not only with the audience who is going to be there, but linking with the performers. Yes. And linking the performers with the society in which they are. Yes. In order to do that, for a long time now, we have been working, the group that I have, I've been working with people with disability, or what is called disability. As I like to say it, there is this ability and there is that ability. Yes. So I'm working with that ability. Yes. And it's very important because I realized that working with people with so-called disability, there is always a compensation of it, which develop another aspect of their talent. So we are looking for the aspect of that talent and we use it and we make them use it in the production. What we realized is that it changed not only the perception that this actor with disability have of himself or herself, but also the perception of the audience and the perception of the people in the area. I remember working with a group where there was a young man with psychological disability and a bit of physical disability. And people in his area used to call him names, right? People can be very bad and difficult. He was in our play playing drum, and because we realized he could do drum, so our drummer, Calvin Mitchell, Calvin taught him drum, and he was having a solo in drum. Years later, driving out of UE, the guard said to me, "Oh, I remember you. You are the director with my neighbor, Michael the drummer." In his area, he's known now as Michael the drummer. So not only he was great on stage, but it means the look of the people in the area towards him have totally changed. And nobody has said to us, "Oh, those guys are good in spite of their disability." No, people say, "Those guys are good, full stop." Exactly. Same thing when we work with deaf actors or deaf dancers, and they are recognized for who they are. And that is what I like, that the society can recognize the value of an actor through its art form, regardless of where that actor comes from, which area, or which disability that this actor could have had or could be seen as that person. Also is the same when we take shows in the prison. We are doing some work in the prison, and that brings us something different, because basically we make the people it's an evasion from the prison. They are not in the prison anymore when they see the show. And we're explaining to them that the plays we are using, they correspond to books, and those books will take them anywhere even if physically, for whatever reason, they end up in jail, when they read a book, they are somewhere else because your imagination will kick in.
Yes.
And that is I think that's also the role of the artist. And it's where we see the value of what we do. We don't see it in the money coming from the ticket that we sell. Of course, that is important when we do a show in the theater because we have to rent the theater. But that's not the real importance. The real importance is to see if something positive came out of our work.
And one of the things that, you know, comes up in terms of in the framework of the policies that exist globally is that there are methods in which, you know, in which through taxation, through incentives, through their funds that can be allocated to ensure that social programs like these, that artists have a minimum standard, because I mean the value that goes beyond just the market in terms of for an artist, for creatives contribution, you know, is so widespread and so fundamental to society and the development of humans throughout history, that, you know, it's something, and we have to wonder and we have to ask ourselves, you know, in a situation like this, would we as individuals give up 2% of our income, you know, towards supporting the arts? And this, if we as a people can get to this place and, you know, advocate for that, then perhaps there would be perspective precarity.
Recording in progress.
What does that mean?
All right. You know, I think the most recent events of COVID-19, I mean, there is the war happening as well in Europe, but I will use COVID-19 from a very national perspective and that effect on precarity. And one of the things we also discussed on Tuesday, but it's just general for artists in general, is that what are the models for earning, right? And supporting yourself in this field that you've chosen to give of your time, talent, and dedication. And a lot of the artists touring is huge for them to be able to earn, because we spoke about developing audiences as well as avenues for earning. And if they're with our population and size, it can you know, be quite finite. So touring is a large part of that experience. And with the so I've said in other forums as well, it's the ability to be able to withstand shocks, right? And as an artist, if you are not able to withstand shocks, and COVID-19 was one of the biggest shocks, you know, it speaks to that precarity. So generally you'll get advice like, okay, if you should really have at least 6 months salaries saved up. I mean, if you're also having a mortgage or having a home, you need more than 6 months, I would just say. But, you know, you need to have savings because, and the thought behind that, and that's within any profession for anyone, the thought behind that is because if something unexpected happens, you need to be able to have a cushion. That is not always the case. I will say, as for an artist, because I've worked both full-time as an artist abroad and I've worked here as well, is that, you know, when I was doing full-time performing abroad, all I had to do was turn up. I just had to keep my instrument, my body, in shape, technically strong. I just needed to turn up. Everything was provided for me, and I got paid. Just do your job, just turn up. When you are in a space where there isn't really an avenue for complete full-time work to be able to sustain yourself, and by sustain yourself, I mean not only pay your bills, but actually to own assets and to actually invest, then you end up having to do so many other things. You know, you don't have the time to just focus on one particular area. Now, that can help in the precarity. So the fact that you would have had a number of different hats that you're wearing or that you can earn from, that helps. So, but it becomes a challenge if you really want to advance your art in a particular way. And in various societies where you are able to do that, then that's where other institutions come in to support that precarity. What are the programs that are in place from a policy level, you know, at a government level, or even aid unions? What exists to support that? Yeah.
Interesting. So my first encounter actually with Janine Jaku was on CNN, right? So I'm sorry, you know, what's coming, right? And during COVID, it was on rotation, you know, because you were affected directly. You were touring, you were on an exchange, a cultural exchange during COVID. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and what that meant for you, and how were you able to pivot with that?
Yeah, so I was there the peak of COVID in Asia, and actually, well, just tell you the beginning, people are like, why are you going to Asia? Asia have COVID, oh my God. And I was like, if it's the God's will, I'm going. And clearly it's God's will, and I went. And when I reached, COVID came here.
Oh, there.
So, but it wasn't so bad where I was in Bali, Ubud, Bali, Indonesia. It's a very creative environment. When I got there, there were a lot of tourists. I was slated to perform on the Bali Spirit Festival, one of the biggest yoga festivals there, or should say probably in the world. And but then people started to leave, and the places where I wanted to go started to shut down, and then everything shut down, you know, except for the supermarkets. But yeah, and I said, wow, now what am I going to do? But I had other plans. I looked on my list on what else I wanted to do, which was to collaborate with artists, to get involved with the people, to get involved with the environment, to complete my album that I've been working on 7 years, you know. And I said, I have 5 more songs to put in, and I have all my sponsors who sent me here. I have to put in work, you know, my fans, everybody is counting on me, and I'm counting on myself. And so I decided to just change the script and just dive right in, and I found some musicians there who actually are reggae artists, their own individual huge artists over there and producers, and we came together and collabed. So I was supposed to spend 2 months, ended up spending 4 months, which was wonderful. And I got some work done. I got to collaborate with Alzheimer's Indonesia, and I got to give some songs towards them without pay or anything, licensed or just free, because I know dementia is a serious matter in the world, and everybody at some point goes through it, family member or somebody, and I had to give back to that. And I know music helps with that. And so just being there, as I said, God's will, you know, and so I was there for a purpose, and I got to do work and collab with people and create music that was just wonderful.
Excellent, excellent. You know, Kerry spoke to, you know, how important the mobility of the artist is, especially in Jamaican context. We are an island, and with a limited population, 3.2 million, and, you know, we have such a large diaspora, and there are so many, you know, there's such a wide audience outside of Jamaica, that we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of economic potential and viability in having access to these markets. Now, Pierre, I know you have a story in terms of the circus and the collaborations that was being done with France, because some of your circus, the persons who were training with you in circus, were supposed to benefit from various programs that existed, but because of COVID, this couldn't happen. Can you give us a little, again, you know, information on that? We brought this into an earlier session, but it is now relevant now in terms of the precarity of the artist and what this meant.
Sure. What happened, it all started from a Interreg program from the EU with Guadeloupe, Martinique, French Guiana, and France. And they invited 2 Caribbean countries, St. Lucia and Jamaica, to be part of it. Edna Manley College was the link for Jamaica, carrying the project for Jamaica. And it's the modern type of circus, which is the Cirque du Soleil style of circus, meaning mixing dance, music, storytelling, and circus. And The idea was that trainers from France and Guadeloupe, which are well advanced in this art form, would come to St. Lucia, Jamaica, work with the artists, train them, and then those artists would join those in Guadeloupe, Martinique, and France and create a show over there, and that show would be touring the different countries. Of course, the first part was done. Trainers came here, work with some of our Edna Manley graduates and students. But when it was time now for them to go there, to work with the artists over there was COVID. So they were stuck, they couldn't go to France. It was restricted at that point. The program became restricted to artists from France, Guadeloupe, Martinique, French Guiana, because they belong to the same territory. So it was not considered as international travel for them. It was like internal routes, but we couldn't join them. So there was a disconnect in the training, disconnect in the project, disconnect in the creative dream. Because the young people who were trained, they were part of that creative dream. We are going to create. Now we train and we'll create together. And it's very frustrated for an artist when we do one part of it, which is like the training part, and then we cannot go to the second part, which is the creative part, when we realize something together. And that is necessary. Also, the restriction in traveling, when there is no COVID, when the restriction is based on visa or on the route for the airlines, because sometimes it's very difficult. When I go to work with Antiguan artists there, it's very difficult for me just to reach there, even if it's nearby.
Of course. There's such inequality in access to mobility of artists.
And we need that mix of creativity, especially when we live in small islands. We need to open up to the other artists in the region.
So in some of the closed sessions and stuff that we've had, and that pulling out the information and the data and the anecdotes, it's the concept of if there is an opening on a festival in France and they really want a reggae artist, or it's going to have to be somebody in the diaspora there because they don't have enough time to apply for a visa to fill the spot with the person, even if the person could take the flight the next day, because it is such a long and uncertain process. And that, whereas if there's something in Jamaica and, somebody from Europe wants to come, there is this sense that they can jump on a plane and they can, land in Jamaica and they can take part, they can access this type of cooperation. And in what you're saying, it's the same type of pathway, because it was the French islands, in fact, because of their association, direct association with Europe, that they don't have the same restrictions as other Caribbean nationals around them, even though they all exist within a project that has the same funding source. And so therefore it breaks up the dream, And so these are some of the pathways that affect artists, and something that certainly, if we're developing a comprehensive policy for artists, that should come to the fore. So I really, all of you have really reflected very, very much so on that. And now, I can't help, all three of you have some association with the Edna Manley College, right? One of the beacons. And just for a little context, so Pierre was working with Le Plus Petit Cirque du Monde in France, right? So the smallest circus in the world, that's the name of it, and it's on the outskirts of France. And I had the opportunity to visit that circus. And when I went there, because I saw these the circus artists from Martinique and Guadeloupe. So this is how this story comes full circle. And I said to them, "Oh my gosh, you're Caribbean! I have to meet you. This, that." And then they're like, "Yeah, we know Jamaicans through Edna Manley," and they were the biggest fans of Edna Manley. They were just like, oh, you know, it's the best institution in the Caribbean. And, you know, so, I mean, there's a strong reputation externally for Edna Manley. But I want you guys to reflect on your journey and your interactions there, because it's at different levels, eh? From student all the way to administration and lecturer and everything in between. In terms of educational capacity and what is needed in terms of training and capacity development, what should we be looking for? What does the future need for these programs? So perhaps I will start from the student perspective.
Okay, I guess that means the younger one's perspective.
You know, it didn't differentiate on age.
Okay, well, when I was a student there, I used to say a lot that this is a great institution. I'm so grateful for this institution, because at the time I was thinking of going to probably a Juilliard or Berkeley. And then after having conversations with my parents and just thinking about it, I say, you know, I need to learn about my culture and my culture's art and how great my culture is before I go and learn other cultures, you know. And being there was just a fantastic kind of family environment, and learning from the greats who were there, who were like Iba Cooper, you know, Morris Gordon, even a Pierre Lemire, Carrie Ann Henry, you know. It's just fantastic learning from these people who have traveled and come back and share their, you know, things from outside to inside and all of that. But as well as know that things have evolved where you need to have a certain degree before you can teach a level, right? And so that kind of limits now how things are carried across to students. So there may be an artist out there who is performing for years and has this experience built up that can share, but because they don't have a master's or that kind of thing, they can't get into the institution to pass on these skills onto the students. So that's one thing that limits what the students can get now. When I was graduating, things were just changing, so I got the ending of that in a sense.
So you think that there was more freedom?
There definitely was more freedom.
Okay.
And I think as well the schools need more funding from governmental agencies, from grants, from sponsors, you know,
And
to
if they
develop
had
more.
this funding, what would they do with it?
Well, they buy equipment and help to bring up the studios to a world class and be on par with the rest of the world. You know, we have the training, we have the talent, it's just we need the environment now.
Okay, so a greater enabling environment. Okay, well said, well said.
All right.
Yes, carry on.
Okay, so I want to comment briefly on something Janine raised as well. So, you know, these are conversations that happen. You know, there's a lot of dialogue, student, lecturers, ministry, etc. And there is what they have a master artist policy, where it acknowledges that there are practitioners in the field who would have had bodies of work that come with that knowledge, and they're able to give that knowledge back. Now, there are certain criteria for that, and so yes, there is something there, but you may not find that a younger person may, you know, fit into that model. But the college, they do have what they'll bring in as guest lecturers, guest artists, you know, that so there are different models that they can pull in to give the students that varied experience. And as Janine said, it's opened up a lot. And so, yeah, it's very exciting. I will say this as well, that I also studied at the college, but I went there as a mature student after, so as I would have studied in other areas. And it was an absolutely fantastic experience. As Janine raised, there is nothing like learning about your culture and really being steeped in that culture. And even if you are not, as Janine would have said, for example, like a traditional reggae artist, because persons are expecting you to come out of Jamaica, you must dance hall, or, you know, be in that reggae feel, or the theater work has to be something that is representative of that, or even the visual arts itself. But that may not be where you are going or heading, but definitely being steeped in a culture and a Caribbean space.
So it's so important for this indigenous
Yes,
culture
the
aspect
indigenous
of things to kind
cultural
of found
aspect,
you.
yeah.
So this is kind of the strength, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
one of the strengths. But
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about where it could go.
Okay, so here's the thing. So there's a lot of current conversation as well about the as always listening to the various stakeholders, curriculum development. So what is signaling that? So responding to what is happening, not just nationally or regionally, because it is a regional institution that has that within its mission to look at the Caribbean aesthetics. It's looking at what is happening internationally that we need to prepare the artists for. So our artists are able and equipped and enabled to perform and do their art anywhere and inspire. So what that signals is more collaboration with our authentic traditional practitioners and that investigation into curriculum development. That's also a regional collaboration, as we would have been exploring, and internationally, because we have memorandums of understandings that we have with international spaces as well. Now, in terms of where it can go, investment is essential. And Janine would have pointed out too that funding, because funding is also what you need to get that time to do that research and that development, and putting into infrastructure, because even that signals the type of infrastructure you need, what you need to innovate and create. We currently have a collaboration with a number of different agencies, and most recently we have one with the SMC group, and they have actually partnered with the institution to help develop a small recording studio. So it's that kind of input, that you see, that's really, going to take us all into another direction, into responding to those needs and innovating. So very important. We spoke also, I have to mention that about NFC and cryptocurrency and how artists can earn to perpetuity through the various models. And I think that this is an exciting area for us to be able to explore through the signals of this indigenous art and form.
Absolutely, digitalization. I mean, even of museums, and as to become more external. Pierre, we will not leave you out on this one.
Okay. Well, I like to put it always in the historical perspective. I started as a young teacher at Edna Manley, teaching there in 1979.
Yes.
And ended up retiring as the Dean of School of Drama. So going through a long transformation of the institution. The institution always been very clear of the role of culture. Our students always absorb the Jamaican culture on different forms, because we have School of Art, we have School of Music, School of Dance, School of Drama. But the students are not working in isolation, they work together. I've worked with Janine when she was a student. I've worked with Kerry when she was you might have been a student still at the time. Yes. So we work, the schools are working together, and also the beauty of Edna Manley is the lecturers are artists. They are artists who can also teach the art form. So they don't teach the art form, they share the art form.
So there you go. So artistic expression at all levels.
That's it. And you see, we have to remember that entertainment is the sub-level of art, which is coming from culture. So we go from culture into art and then into entertainment. So Edna covers all the levels.
Right.
And it's very important. But for the future, we have to make sure that the culture stay very important. We don't look at the end product, that I would say entertainment. Remember that it's coming from the culture. So we have to keep the culture going in order to
serve the artists
exactly.
for the long run.
And then we need the funding, because we need to be up to date in our infrastructure.
Okay. So very important. So I would like to now, kind of go through some of the elements again, bring it back to some of the elements that are suggested to us in this UNESCO framework that we are generally a part of for adoption on the local level. And these are some of the guidelines that have been implemented in different places across the world. So the first one, and we've spoken about that, recognize the important role of artists in society in its widest sense, yes? Protect the freedom of expression of artists and recognize the rights of professional and trade union organizations. Now, that's something that we dealt with on Tuesday, but I'm going to read through this list and then we may just generally come in on that. Develop texts and programs that encourage artistic expression. Implement an arts education and training policy. Promote copyright and related rights. Regulate the employment, working, and living conditions of artists. And grant artists a social status equivalent to that of other workers, particularly in terms of health and insurance. Okay, so this is something that's been adopted elsewhere, and things that we can consider in our own framework. As where are we along this spectrum? Any reflections on this?
I want to make a quick. So when I look at a lot of the models internationally, when you look at the development of the artists and their journey, it starts really from primary, secondary, tertiary. And one of the things why Edna Manley College has such a special place in my heart is because I have seen persons come in with very little to no exposure sometimes to the art form at the primary and secondary level. And they have nurtured and transformed these beautiful individuals into these artists that they imagined for themselves. Now, in a lot of the other models internationally, the art starts from primary education. And it's something that I do believe that we will see, and I would love to see. There's a lot of discussion about STEM versus STEAM, and where's the A in STEM. So I know that there are initiatives towards that, but I'd love to see it develop even faster, where every single art form has its own discrete, the ability to have its own discrete space from primary education right through. And believe me, you will see that impact not only in the artists who enter into that tertiary space, but how they exit and how they contribute even further to GDP. Studies that are showing the impact of the creative and cultural industries to GDP. It's absolutely encouraging.
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. Basically, we have to follow what I would call the Cuban system for that, where they really find the young artists in primary level, secondary level, and train them fully. And when they come to the tertiary level, they are already almost the equivalent of when our students are living in Manley College.
Yes.
So we would get students coming to us at CSEC level who are already trained, and so they can open up even more after.
Personal reflection?
Well, I'd say you had mentioned about in that policy health insurance, these things.
Yes.
And going back to what Pierre and Kerry are saying about education from the baby up, it's very correct. You have to get them involved in their craft, to get them fully aware of what's happening, and not just what's happening on the artistic side, but what's happening on the business side, what's happening on the policy side, what's happening on the basically the paperwork side.
Right.
Who is JARIA? Who is JCAP? Who is JFMAU? Who protects your rights? And being a member of JFMAU, I've learned that there are insurance policies there.
Can you tell us what that is?
Oh, sorry, JFMAU is Jamaica Federation of Music. Yeah, okay. Oh, wow. Swish over my head. Look it up. JFMAU, Google it. That's what Google is for. Google it.
You know, Google has come up time and time again.
It's a union for musicians, basically, right?
Course.
To the
and one of the
point.
oldest, I understand.
Yes, and one of the oldest that goes way back,
Yes,
founded by Sonny Bradshaw, beginning the whole society. And it's protecting the rights of us musicians, protecting the rights of musicians and affiliates. So it's not just musicians, it's dancers, it's drama, it's visual artists, and it's putting policies in the right way, that we are paid correctly, that we are respected, that we are treated correctly. And they've put in, like I said, the insurance, special insurance, so that if we get sick, there's something that can cover us. There's beneficiaries and all these things, that if you die, there's something that can help to cover in your funeral and all these things, which is needed. And I think at JCAP, Google it. JACAP, JCAP. Please, Google it. We have time for that.
Always time. Someone can put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat. JCAP, right? And as a member of JCAP, there are things in place for funerals and all that things. But it's necessary for creatives to be a part of these societies, to have these groups together. There's in film, I know there's WIFTA, Women in Film and Theatre.
Yes.
Look it up too.
And there's JAPTA, and JARIA,
right, and JARIA, and all these societies.
So
We need to create these societies. We need to support these societies as artists, because the societies are there for us, and that would help with policies in place.
I beg two plugs. One, there's something that I think that we also need to just put out there, that even though, yes, we are studying towards being gainfully employed or being able to sustain yourself, the arts it's special too, because just studying the arts changes and develops the individual. So I do just want to say that sometimes I worked with an organization where the lady was like, listen, I'm not here to teach you how to, I'm not here to do social development, I'm not here to teach you how to have discipline. I'm here to teach you dance.
Yes.
And through that, you will learn discipline. You will learn teamwork. You will learn. So sometimes just acknowledging and supporting learning the art for the art's sake is essential. You know, it develops so many of the tenets that we have in this 21st century citizen. So I just want to put that out there as well. And secondly, just to say that the ecosystem, the development of the ecosystem is essential, because we can have all the great training, and if we do not have avenues that support our artists in whether earning, like I said, being gainfully employed, you know, it's something that is essential, and we need to have that deliberate pull out, that study. Okay, how do we develop these models that are culturally relevant to this space? We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we have to make it relevant to our specific society, you know, and look at that regional development, that regional support, regional collaboration, because that's where we are as Caribbean people, you know. So I really we need some focus on developing those models and avenues.
All right, so I want to put a mix up a little bit, connect a certain dot. So before we had the digital panel, right? And, you know, it was clear that we all need to be open to the digital space. As artists, in what way are you opening up? This is I'm being now a total, I'm coming in, and I want to know your personal engagement with the digital space as an artist, and what does that mean for you, and what do you need to empower yourself in this space, you know? We're talking about a metaverse, NFTs, cryptocurrency, you know, or we're talking about, you know, TikTok. So let's hear it. Let's hear it. And I want to start with Pierre.
Well, it's where it is now. And what COVID helped us to find out, it's how useful it is for us. Because during 2 years, we couldn't go on stage. So we had to do something else. I directed pantomime online and produced it online 2 years in a row. A short one, because online you cannot go on for 2 hours. People would get tired of it. But it was simple enough for me because I'm accustomed to use technology in my stage production. I always use film, I always use video, everything. So, but it showed me now how I can use it at a higher level.
Absolutely.
And now that it's done, I don't want to go back.
Yes.
That to say, I'm working on a production now, and I'm thinking, how am I going to mix basically the art forms? Because I learned to do that.
Yes.
And a part of me now wants, as an artist, to continue to do that.
Yes.
And I want to see how it can be integrated to the stage. So I have somebody going through a screen in the stage and end up only in the screen.
Right.
And then, because COVID forced us, basically, to go virtual and discover the tools of the virtual.
Yeah.
So now is to make sure we don't say, okay, we're going back on stage and we forget all of that. No, we need to integrate all of that and see how our creative space can work through those tools.
That's so important because some studies recently coming out of the COVID shift, and I'm sorry if we're wrapping up now, but this is a very important point. Some studies coming out of COVID show that if you do not, those who just rapidly change and jump on it and don't internalize it, they get fatigued very quickly with this whole digital space. They're just like, oh, it's everywhere, and trying to get onto everything, but it doesn't necessarily work for them as an artist after a while.
So for me, right, I laughed because I get my friends and supporters call me out all the time for this. They think I need to post more and do this and do that, but you know what? And they're like, do you want to just be this silent artist, this mysterious artist? It is. I do think that artists need to position themselves and learn about the digital environment. I'm a proponent of technology. I think it has opened up ways for us to collaborate even further, to develop work together further without even having to cross borders. There's nothing like live and face-to-face, but it also means that we can do more, and then when we get together, then we can help to look at costs. However, I think we have to be careful for putting out work just because of putting out work to be in the digital space. You really have to do a lot of reflection. What is it that you want to put out there? Who are you as an artist? What are you trying to gain? However, I think there's also a space for institutions or people to help to train artists to explore that for themselves, and also to understand this metaverse that we're now existing in. And so it's a duty. It's a duty for the artist to get there, but there is the opportunity for spaces and persons to support that knowledge and choice.
Okay, and Janine, take it away, your last thoughts, and we're closing.
I've been loving this virtual space, honestly, and I've realized that during COVID, those who were not on virtual life all are on virtual life now. Yes. And honestly, when I would perform live, in person with people is different from virtual, but I enjoy the virtual, and here's why. I reach more people virtually than live. Okay. I get to communicate with people easily, like in chat and all these things, than live. I have a bag of people asking me questions, and I say, oh my God, who are you? What I can't keep up. But it's been good, and I've been able to do collaborations with persons in Africa and in Asia and in Europe all at the same time, which has just been opened broadly, amazingly. Just the other day, Tuesday, we had Music Unites Jamaica Foundation had a concert with Austria and Jamaica simultaneously happening thanks to this virtual thing, and it was just absolutely wonderful. The audience clapping there, the audience clapping here, and we're all having the same experience one time. And so I just love this whole virtual thing. And just as Pierre said, I hope it doesn't go away and we don't just boom, bam. No, we're going to be living with it.
So thank you very much. I mean, we've considered many themes that are directly relevant to the status of the artist and who the artist is and the value of an artist that goes way beyond just the product. And it takes in the whole process. So thank you very much for your invaluable conversation today around this topic. I believe that it has connected some dots, so thank you. And thank you to everyone who tuned in.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you guys so tend to get left out of the conversation. So I am so excited, happy, and enthralled that not only are the practitioners involved in the conversation, but also involved in policies and the conversation relating policies and strategies and stuff like that. It is indeed wonderful, wonderful. Thank you guys so much. That was a wonderfully riveting conversation. You guys at home, let us know whether or not you enjoyed it. If you have any further comments, any further thoughts, you can connect with us on Twitter. Yes, so that's Carrie Ann walking by there. You can connect with us on Twitter. The handle is NOC_culture, Facebook and Instagram. Your handle is @networks-of-culture. All right, talk to us. Let us know what's your thoughts. What are your thoughts? What are your comments? Hashtag us KNOC. Hashtag connect the dots. Hashtag networks of culture. All right, join the conversation, guys. Amazing things are happening, and I don't want you all to be left out. Okay, so our final topic of conversation for this afternoon. We've put so many things before us, but what is the way forward? Yep, that's what it's called, the way forward, collaborations and models of connecting the dots. So, this session will be a response to the consideration raised throughout the various Kingston Networks of Culture events and will change policy influencers, policymakers, and those who are directly affected by the policies to look to the future and to maximize the potential of collaborations and to make efforts to connect the dots for a stronger overall ecosystem. One in many more artists and industry players can develop and leverage their creativity in the support of Jamaica's sustainable development considerations. Now, joining us on the panel, we have both our facilitators today. Yes, we have Dr. Deborah Hinkling-Gordon, lecturer, coordinator, BA, CCI, and BA, Institute of Caribbean Studies, UWI Mona, principal consultant, DHG consultant, lead consultant, KNOC, and CRP. Also, we have Mrs. Stephanie Thomas Gilbert Roberts, Director of Strategy and Projects and Consultant, KNOC, CRP, Comedie, Brussels, and Belgium. Now, joining them to complete the trio this afternoon, we have Kyle Eitel. Guys, are we ready to jump in on this wonderful, wonderful conversation? Yes, the way forward. Throwing over to you, Deborah. You look ready to go there, already engaging in some conversations over there. I love it.
You know, we're wrapping up. We are definitively kind of come to the end of a full day. Started this morning at 9 o'clock with a couple of ministers and the town clerk and the ambassador, the chargé d'affaires of the European Union, the European delegation to Jamaica. And we were talking policy, and that's how we started the day. We started talking policy. It's been a day about policy. Everything about today, it has been about policy, and it has been about working out exactly how the things that we do and the things that we need to do will impact the process of policy development and the kind of information that we need to feed into the policy process, the kind of information we need to get out of the policy process the kind of information that we need to be assimilating in terms of, you know, putting together this holistic picture of what we want for the cultural and creative industries. And I think we're all agreed at this point that we want a holistic picture for the cultural and creative industries. So for this session, our final session, between Stephanie and I, who have been walking the walk of this research project, we are going to be talking a little bit about some of the stuff that we've been doing, how we designed it, how we've done some of the work, how we've interacted with the various people that we've encountered. And we've asked Kyle to come and join us because Kyle represents an organization called the Cultural and Creative Industries Alliance. The Cultural and Creative Industries Alliance is a group of professional organizations and intermediary organizations who represent arts and artists. So essentially, all of the unions, the guilds, the professional organizations, the associations, what we're trying to do is get everybody together under one umbrella group so that we can all kind of take a unified approach. Now, one of the things that has happened in the cultural and creative industries is we've always been caught out as creatives because they've always been able, and anyone who has wanted to be able to, you know, to kind of either create dissent or not to respond to particular information, have always said, but you guys aren't organized, you aren't sorted, you know, you don't have an association. Who do we go to if we want to speak to the artists or speak for the artists? And we really can't be talking to government about fragmentation if we ourselves can't get ourselves together. So I think it's a good move to have Kyle here, who will tell us, I'm going to ask him first to tell us a little bit about this alliance. And then we're going to, for the period, we're going to be talking about some of the research work that we're doing and how we can connect the dots.
Okay, yeah, so the Alliance is, we're still an informal organization of formally established organizations largely. We came together during the COVID, which was it was an alliance created out of necessity because, as everybody is well aware, the creative and cultural industries largely shut down during the COVID, during the pandemic when we had lockdowns and everything. And unlike other industries, a majority of our subsectors just could not be reopened because we had, you know, they rely on people gathering everywhere. So one of the primary goals of the organization at the time was to share information between each other and to gather a voice to see where everyone was and to also share critical information about how each subsector that was shut down could possibly restart, you know, because we did not have a roadmap. We did not know what COVID would do. We did not know where the pandemic was going to go. So we started out by sharing information and then trying to, you know, use that alliance of people to communicate with the government. You know, we had, you know, issues on that front. And so we've decided to continue the alliance in order to continue expanding the group itself, you know, getting everybody, like you said, under the same umbrella so we can just start talking.
And do you mind telling us what some of the issues were that you had in terms of communicating?
So we, during that initial shutdown phase, we actually, we reached out as a collective to the Ministry of Culture, Gender, and so on, to just open a dialogue with them. We're believers that, you know, it's not up to one person to come up with solutions. You know, we are a bunch of very highly skilled, highly intelligent people, you know, with a large amount of resources as a collective. So we were looking to sit down, come to the table with the, you know, with the authorities and figure out what needed to be done. For instance, as an individual organization, the Jamaica Film and Television Association, which at the time I was director of, I sat on the board of that, we had drafted proposed working regulations for our industry because we were largely still a necessity. You know, we had to do public service announcements, television had to keep going, all that kind of stuff. And so we were looking to examples like that and international examples to bring those to the table with the ministry and propose a way forward as, you know, as the situation evolved. However, we simply just could not elicit a response from them. We heard that there was, you know, dialogue and going on with some stakeholders in the industry, but, you know, everybody would ask around and it's like, who are they talking to? Because we're all, you know, we're more or less all here. So who are they really talking to?
Could it have been, though, that for yourselves, you are brand new, so you wouldn't have necessarily been a known entity, and you wouldn't have been a formal entity? Could have there have been that tension?
Sort of yes and no. We did not sign it sort of as the Creative and Cultural Alliance. It was more a collective where we signed an open letter as the organizations, which are all formally largely, more or less, largely recognized and registered with the ministry.
Okay. So we've learned today, the minister herself said very clearly, the ministry has an open door policy. The ministry is an open book, and that anybody can, you know, kind of walk in through the door and get some form of redress from the ministry. So we're going to hold her to our word about that, and we're going to see if we can actually very clearly connect one of those dots. We've been doing a lot of that for the past couple
yes,
of weeks.
absolutely.
Actually, just literally, you know,
Yeah.
seeking to connect dots, and so we're going to try to see if we can make that happen. It's important. It must happen. And I'm sure there must be a very reasonable explanation as to why it all
Oh, definitely. And my thing is that the goal of the aim of all this is not to vilify anybody. You know, things were happening at a pace. Our goal is moving forward that we want to, you know, kind of not to formalize relationships. We have a lot of avenues to do that coming up, as well as to, you know, kind of just establish our place in the scheme of the broader scheme of Jamaica.
All right. So
Excellent. No, this sounds really great, and it ties in very much to the work that we've been doing along this way. So I want to share with you a bit about a database, how our approach to building a database. And we are not looking at it as, you know, a list of individuals, so to speak, but we see ourselves in connecting dots as a source of sources. Understanding who your members are and what data they have, what data they're collecting, you know, what repositories of information exist. And so in the Kingston Networks of Culture, we're playing around with kind of how data is structured in a simple Excel file. So in terms of, you know, we've thought about it and asked around and everything, and everybody comes back to the most flexible kind of tool in the original stage of building a database. Still, you know,
Excel. I'm a big fan of Excel.
Yes. So we're doing this, and I just want to perhaps share.
okay, as you do that,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
I just want to kind of put this all in context. So one of the things that our mandate was mapping.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So originally we were asked, can you do this mapping project? And one of the things we had to think to ourselves about was, what is mapping? And I think it matches very closely to the issue of what you're saying. It's really about finding people where they are and putting the pieces together.
Yes.
Yeah. So in doing that, we kind of thought, okay, so the Jamaican landscape is such a, you know, kind of varied and kind of, you know, abzucky ecosystem. So how are we going to do that? And we thought that what we would do is put together what we call a database of databases. This is Stephanie's idea. So essentially, one of the things we're going to ask you, you know, as we go into this process of explaining to you what we've done and we see how we can interface, is to determine whether the organizations within the Alliance will be willing to share and integrate information about their databases into this process of creating a broader database So that's one of the things that we're going to talk to you about. There's also the broader ministry database. What are your thoughts on you know, did a whole session on this yesterday, on databases and data collection and.
So I think data is king. I believe that we are in a very interesting position right now, a very powerful position, where we have the ability to collate a lot of very good information, which we did not have that ability to do in the past. You know, we have a lot more avenues of communication, and literally just sharing, you know, giving access to a database is literally a couple of clicks. I don't even need a computer at this point. I could go and yell at my phone, I think, at this point in time. But it isn't something that we have discussed as a group yet, but it is something that I see coming up on the horizon. One of the projects that I am working on is the drafting of the creative economy legislation. And that collection of information, that knowing where, you know, where these groups are, and not just the established groups, but there are a lot of groups I find that are coming up now that are just figuring out how to organize, how to get together, are still at an informal stage, and, you know, figuring there's a lot of work that goes into creating an organization, and, you know, getting them into a place where they can start collecting that data, where we can get in touch with them, you know, just an email or a phone call. It's still a lot of work, but I think it's an absolutely necessary key component to what is going to happen going forward.
The legislation, we're going to come to that in a minute, because that's a very important talking point. We'd like for you to tell us. We had asked the ministry to join us. Today is the last of the year, so anybody who's doing anything technical in the ministry is tied up with closing off the year. So they declined. But perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the process as we go forward. But I'm going to ask Stephanie first to just outline for us the process of the database, the sources of sources.
Okay, so thank you both, and I mean, this is a nice little connection that is happening here, and it's very relevant to this. So in terms of the database, our database aims to identify Jamaican cultural and creative stakeholders as sources of data and databases. It's an active pilot of a structure of a living database that can be monitored, updated, and expanded. So this is really a pilot. It starts with, you know, persons who have been involved in the smaller net of this limited project, but it acknowledges that there is so much room for expansion. You know, conceptually expanding out based on associations that themselves have associations, or members that have members. I mean, it is really a cascading concept. And if I can change, here we go. So a little bit about this. So again, we're using, you know, Excel very, very simply. And in this project, we start with the notion of music as central in ecosystem. Now, we could have started with visual arts, we could have started with dance, but UNESCO, Kingston has this designation as a city of music, and with it comes this type of resources and needs, and so we want to look at how, from that point, we can map a wider ecosystem. So the points will come up. So dance still intersects directly with the music ecosystem, and then it forms its own cluster around it and emerges. So as we say, you could start at any point, but in this limited pilot, we have gone with music. So here we pull out music organizations and groups and music individuals in this pilot. We have the general CC individuals, and we have CCI organizations. And again, the distinction is very important because we acknowledge that behind organizations are individuals, but also individuals have many different hats. And so you can connect individuals to organizations and organizations back to individuals. And in that, you find the intersections, you know, and it's a very interesting concept. I see
I mean, there's already a question that I have for Cal coming out of this.
Yes.
And I mean, because we can do it in a kind
Yeah,
of interactive
absolutely.
way. The alliance is an alliance of different disciplines, individuals from different disciplines. Explain to us how the alliance works in keeping with the ecosystem concept.
So the structure of the alliance is what we could consider fluid. So we don't have we have a rotating chair. Every couple of months we change the chair of the group to a different different organization, and that organization will host that quarterly meeting, and we continue that way as we plan to continue that way as we expand, and so what we're hoping to do is to then the next stage is to figure out a kind of formal legal structure to exist under. Have been suggestions about how to go about that, but it's still in discussion. We actually do have a meeting coming up in another couple of weeks, and so what we're looking to do is to utilize the knowledge base of each group, because every group, even though we are different disciplines, we have a lot of information that is relative to each other. You know, I originally started in live production, stage production, and moved over into film and television production, and we have a lot of those cross-disciplinary things that have direct like practices and structures and stuff that are directly applicable to each other. So rather than necessarily reinventing the wheel, we can look at each other's vehicles and adapt things that will work through that information sharing. So that that kind of bringing together of just ideas and conversation alone is going to be a benefit. And then as we formalize our relationships between the groups, we'll likely see probably some more cross association events and technical workshops and stuff like that, because art doesn't live alone. Everything. I'm from the world of film. We depend on every single discipline out there. We all draw inspiration from each other, and so that is going to be the key. That knowledge sharing is going to be the key going forward.
Okay, so can an individual practitioner walk up and say, I want to be a part of the alliance? Or is it associations and businesses and...
The CCI itself is an association of associations. So we're not catering to individuals. We will, of course, accept help from any individuals who are not necessarily associated but want to get involved in the running of the organization itself. Help is always welcome. We do have, it's not just industry, direct industry associations. We do have private organizations, well, let me say private, like Kingston Creative and such, who are stakeholders in the broader creative industries but are not representative of any particular group of artists. But our goal is to also encourage people to get involved in. I heard it in the previous session, but encouraging people to get involved in their industry organizations. If it doesn't exist, maybe it's time to talk to your peers and get get something together. Once it is a process. It is not easy, but at the end of the day, it is worth it. I was there from the birth of JAFTA, from a single meeting in a boardroom. What was it? Oh God, it's what, 2022, 2015?
2015,
yeah.
at the Ministry of Tourism.
Yeah.
I still have pictures of that, people sitting on the floor.
Yeah, it was so many of us.
Yeah.
And then it was just, literally we sat on my veranda and drafted our memorandum, our memorandum of the organization or whatever it's called. So it's at the end of the day, we're all people, we're all individuals. We're not, we can put on a little bit of the pomp and circumstance and just realize that we have to put our shoulders to the grindstone and just do the work. And then now to see JAFTA where it's gone, where we're having this film lab development, we're making steps forward in terms of getting funding, making those important international connections as far as market reach and co-production partnerships and stuff like that. And those things have come entirely because JAFTA exists and we've been able to approach things with a voice.
Right, absolutely. It's funny how, the linkages just kind of appear, because that takes us back to the work that is happening here, that Stephanie can explain to us now how we have been able to classify exactly what we found, that we have individuals, that we have businesses, we have different types of businesses, we have different types of groups, and so a part of the stuff that we've been trying to do is to do the classification. So tell us about that stuff.
Absolutely. But if you don't mind, I just want to also point to the very important thing that we are also doing source information for financial organizations and individuals, as well as and looking at funding pools that exist in the creative industries, because we believe that, you know, in everything that we have seen, access to financing is such a critical area that it needs to be a part of any kind of living database of accessibility and coming together. And so, yes, this is what we were referring to in terms of the type of cultural and creative organization classification. And, you know, we really looked at how others have classified, what the literature said, and had discussions about how this applies to our indigenous circumstance. And I will go, I know it's not very clear in front of us now, but it's broken down into collective management rights organization, central government agency, regional government agency, international organization, local education institution in CCI relating to CCS, and then private entities broken down into umbrella organizations, professional associations. And just to note, when you were speaking, we would consider the alliance an umbrella organization, and then the associations in your association, you know, this thing, the professional association. So I was just even categorizing as you described your structure. And then you have intermediary organizations that this concept of intermediary organizations is not one written in stone in our policy, in our policy discussions and stuff, but it's something that is coming up very strongly in literature in the African context. And as we look, across the border to the southern, we should consider if, we do have these structures and we do have so many that, that become representatives in this different way.
I think channels. We actually have had them from the days of Solid Agency when, and Headline Entertainment in the early days, when they started the processes of representation. And even well before that, some of those, really historic managers of artists and so on. So we've had people who have been the intermediaries, but we're now in the process of formalizing them into sectors, groups and sectors, which become a part of organizations like yours.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, these South-South relationships, I was in a conference a couple of years ago that really drove home to me the importance of doing that at every level. We tend to look up as far as where we can get information from and where the opportunities lie, but the truth is we have if we look to our left, if we look to our right, if we look to the south, there's a lot of opportunity, huge audiences out there, huge places, a lot of expertise, and we need to continue down that path, because when we build things kind of owning the ecosystem in a sense ourselves, that is how we're going to define our future.
Yeah, indeed. You want to just, quickly wrap up with this?
Sure. So we also have hubs, clusters, then you have formal enterprises, formal independents, research, educational and training, publicly listed companies, and then a very important category, informal enterprises and informal associations, networks, and cooperatives. And this is something that has come up in our conversations. Many of the entities and associations that are doing the legwork out there exist as informal associations, and we believe that there is a space for them in terms of this type of classification and a better understanding of what drives them. So this is in terms of how the database here is classified. And then in terms of the CCS subsectors, perhaps Deborah, you can just quickly.
So essentially what we did is we looked at most of the government agencies have different sets of industries that they examine. So for example, industry and commerce has a particular set of 5 or 6. Ministry of Culture has a different set of 5 or 6, or there are some overlaps. even PIOJ and other studies, the 2007 export study, each one has a different configuration. So we figured, listen, if we're going to be mapping and we're going to be examining how the sector works, we need to look at all of them. We need to see, kind of configure them in a way that makes sense, that it is inclusive, everybody's there. So we found 20, and we identified 20 subsectors. So we see the cultural and creative sector as the overarching universal sector, and then we found 20 sectors. And from there, that breaks into at least 40 to 60 industries. So this is the kind of assumption that we started with, that we think is important, Kyle, so that even if we look at them and change them and fix the configuration and agree to disagree and so on, that can help to form new associations. So if we look at the 20 and then we look at the 40, then essentially, you may end up with an association of 60 different groups, depending on what the numbers look like. You look like you have a comment.
Yeah, no, just looking at this and thinking that I have a lot of homework, because this is the second study that in the last 2 weeks that has come out, so it's such good information, because I remember when I kind of started on, back in Jamaica, and, was doing a lot of advocacy and, doing a lot of fundraising and pitches and stuff like that information on the industries was very hard to get. It was maybe 1 or 2 studies done 5 years ago back then, and now to see just so much good data, it's really refreshing, and it's going to, like I said, make a lot of difference going forward now that we can tell our story in some concrete terms.
Yeah. So essentially, these 20 break down into 40, up to 60, because every day there are new jobs. Every day there are new sets of industries. Every day, the metaverse, does that become an industry all of its own, or does it, some of those questions. So, and
so here, just in terms of, quickly a snapshot of the database here, we break it down based on CCS focus, whether it is sector focus area, database notes, key contact persons, and it expands, and we have, we're creating a list of the larger organizations here, and I think, type of organization here, you can see, these are rights organizations, CMOs, or private organizations, and the classification, and here, we can put in database notes. So here, this is, for example, coming from online desk research database of the membership, for example, of this particular association,
so
Jamaica Music
this
Society.
This is where we're saying, Kyle, that the information can interface. Now, we're not asking you to hand us your database. Mm-hmm. What we're asking all the organizations to do, or as many as who will, is to say, we have a database with 20,000. Mm-hmm. We have a database with 10,000, mm-hmm. 5,000, 1,000, 500. Mm-hmm. And we can then list this, and we can get an aggregate. Mm-hmm. So it is a means of mapping without having to do the head count. Mm-hmm. So because you will have done the head count, and we can also, and there will be people who overlap. So one of the things that we also found with the mapping process is that our creatives, and I'm sure you'll attest to this, Kyle, our creatives, they aren't working in one sector.
Oh, absolutely not.
Tell us about it.
I alone, I'm a teacher. And within my sector, I do 3 different jobs depending on the project, and a lot of us, it comes down to survival. Bills need to be paid at the end of the month, that kind of thing. And, sometimes the art just isn't ready to pay you yet. So you gotta, you have to do the client work. You have to go do the day job or whatever it is. And hopefully the aim of this is that, in 10 years down the road, it'll be less of us having to do this and more of us being able to focus on our art, focus on our specialization, and, raise the ceiling of the industry to another level.
Yeah, that famous question. So what do you do? And then you have to stop and think.
Yeah.
You have to go, yes.
You know, what would be most relevant in this consideration? Absolutely, happens all the time. Okay, and just quickly, here you see in terms of the funding pools, so there are many different, we've found in our research that there's so many different organizations that are creating funds for creatives.
They want to give away money.
They want to give away money, but I don't know that the knowledge is shared and that it's widely accessible. So
I did a project just this week in terms of evaluating projects for a broader region about funding, and these were organizations, and I kept thinking to myself, why is it that we're not seeing any Caribbean ones? There are lots of organizations from Latin America that are actually, kind of applying for these pools of funds. Nobody from the Caribbean, yeah? And I'm thinking to myself, what's this about?
Yeah, it's kind of goes back to the previous topic we were talking about, where everybody is just kind of hustling to make ends meet. And, having gone through several grant processes myself, it is a difficult process.
Yeah,
it's onerous, it's
yeah.
time consuming. And a lot of the time, you'd reach halfway through a grant thing and you hit a question or a requirement and it's just like, why am I bothering with this?
I might even get
Yeah,
this,
it's a lottery,
Yeah,
and
it's hard.
that is one of the big focuses in any sort of policy and industry discussions going forward, is making the funding accessible. One of the issues I've seen is that too many times we try to pre-pick winners in a sector, and it's not a thing that will work in the creative sector. We can't predict, as much as market research as we love to believe we do, and predicting, describe your audience and stuff like that. We don't know what's gonna hit. I spent last weekend watching about 6 hours of Is It Cake? You never know what creative spark is just gonna just find an audience of millions, so our focus needs to be to provide just that base level so that people can focus on the creating, whether it's painting or making movies or making music or doing fashion and stuff like that. Give them the space to grow those skills, and importantly, this is the most important thing about funding, allow them to fail. Allow us to create the projects, and if the project doesn't find an audience, it isn't the end of your career as an artist. You don't have to pack up and go home.
So I definitely have to be a little bit of a contrarian this now, because I was speaking to a venture capitalist in this whole kind of frame of looking at who deals with angel investors. And there is this sense that it is important to understand that when you go to some funding sources, especially private funding sources, that they do not have the same considerations as a public source of funds. And so therefore you can't expect them to just be open to a failing artist, or a failing product, whereas this needs to come with some kind of guarantee or program or something that comes with support to be able to enable these private stakeholders, because they cannot replicate this kind of public good.
They're not as risk tolerant. Yeah, which is it's understandable, and it is also to some extent a necessary pressure. But there is a level that we need to get to start out, and I can talk from the perspective of movies, in that we need to just start producing at a certain level. We need to start making the content, because without the content, and I believe somebody on your first panel was talking about this in terms of the spaces and the studio spaces, we need to have the content first to make the investment in the infrastructure worthwhile. And we can make no guarantees on if that content is going to find an audience. It's more about, to me, the guarantees need to be more about, are we going to get a complete thing of a certain quality, a certain technical quality, which I think is very possible now. I've seen, there's a short film that came out recently that was just brilliant, like it's sci-fi action, my kind of thing. And the quality of it, though, the quality is what spoke to me. Maybe if the feature is made, maybe it'll find an audience, maybe it won't. But we need to take that bet to start out. We as a country, as a collective, if we are invested in culture being the start. And then once we reach, once we're producing, turning over, what does Netflix call it? They call it the churn. So what they do is that they don't have any guarantees, but they they build up that library of stuff. It's music, it's it's fashion, it's it's your repertoire of movies, and once we do that, then we're going to start having the big hits. We can start with small bets. It doesn't have to be a big, well, it's big in our context, but in the global context, it's not as big a risk. But we need to start taking those chances with our artists, start making them comfortable that, that they're not going to have to go and pack up and give up the art and go and, go into a call center and work for the rest of their lives.
I think, just in kind of summing it up and wrapping it up, that we need to start listening to each other. That it's as basic as that. There may be different perspectives. We have found so many different perspectives. We found so many different people who come in the same direction from so many different ways. We just need to start to listen to each other and kind of help each other to translate.
Yeah. I was involved in a fairly infamous project, film infrastructure project, a couple of years ago, and my big lesson from that project failing to move forward was that we came into the industry kind of fresh, me and my business partner at the time, and with a prescriptive solution for what we saw as the problem in Jamaica. What we were proposing wasn't wrong, but we were not listening in terms of the how to get to that point. And that since learning kind of that hard lesson, it has influenced me to do exactly what you're saying, which is to listen and that's kind of what the CCI Alliance and the various industry associations are allowing us to do, is to get together and just talk things out, see where the problems are. There are people with decades more experience in the industry than me. There are people coming into the industry brand new with some fresh ideas that are better than what, the older ones of us, and the current ones of us have thought before. And we're able to then, kind of just talk to each other, figure out what are the common problems, what are the things that we're facing together, and then come up with the solution. And I think, as you said rightly, that talking to each other, and realizing that we're not, no one group or one person or one ministry or anything is alone in what they're doing. We have solutions if we work together.
Okay. As we wrap, I have one final question for you. What does the CCI Alliance want? What do you want?
We would like to see, okay, that's a complex, there's a simple answer and there's a long essay portion to the answer, which I'm going to leave for another time. Maybe I'll write a blog post or something. But the short answer is that we would like to see proper recognition for the creative industries in this country. It is, we've had a long, largely informal relationship, even though the cultural industries define Jamaica. Our music is you say you're Jamaica, it's sports and it's music. Those are the first things that come out of people's mouth. Even movies. Like, I've had people, when I was at film school, people would come to me and start talking about shutters and stuff like that, just out of the blue because they found out I was Jamaican one day. But as a nation, as a formal nation and stuff, we have not given the industries the recognition and the structures that we need to thrive, that legislative policy environment that it needs to thrive. And I think that is going to be our core driving force going forward for the next however long perhaps we're around. But that will be our first big target.
Wonderful. Well, Kyle, I want to thank you. You've helped us to articulate, what our mission was and match it back to some of the things that are needed and already exist. And this issue of listening to each other is an important one. I think that's a third theme that has kind of emerged. The other two have been themes of inclusion and rethinking formalization These are some of the things that we've been really grappling over these past 5 months. And so, you know, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come and tell us about the organization. We, you know, we support you in your efforts. We are going to be in touch directly with you. We've already been in touch with Latoya. We would love to be able to kind of have some kind of more formal discussions about, you know, the database and how we can work it through. But really, thank you very much for taking the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to all the industry people watching, get involved with your organizations. We're doing a lot of work in terms of policy now. So now is the time to get involved, get your voice heard.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
There is a shift. The tide is turning.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kyle. That was very, very informative. In fact, I thoroughly enjoyed that. We're going to currently ask our researchers some questions. So first, I just want to say, when I was in the UK training, there was a company or an organization called Spotlight that for you leaving college, you'd have to be involved in Spotlight or you'll never get a job. Also, as an actress, as a dancer, whatever, there was a database that persons who are looking to hire at whatever level, so if you want to hire a cameraman or a set designer or a performer, artist, whatever, you would have to be registered with Spotlight as an employee and employer, respectively, and for you to find your person, whatever your need is. So when I came back to Jamaica, I was trying to find that kind of database because I wanted to register. So I wanted to upload my CV or my resume, whatever you're saying out there, and this is what I can do, and this is, so jobs would come my way. As a creative on the grassroots level, I found that was challenging because there was no such database. Can you, anyone want to jump on the back? I was just telling a little story, but can you jump on the back of that for me?
No, it's a very important story actually. I suppose what we could call the ultimate database, which is the e-registry at the ministry. Yeah. Right. It's relatively simple. I suppose there were times earlier when it was kind of being stuck. I haven't seen it lately, but it's relatively simple. I've seen people who have kind of gotten through on it. So that's the database of databases, the national database. And then there are other small databases, like I said, that we've been collecting, where people are putting the elements together. I think there is need to connect the dots.
You mean like the JARIA and the JAFTAs and stuff like that?
Yes. So for example, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what is happening, and I wish we did know. I wish we could get this kind of technical detail to be able to in a more informed manner
have the conversation between bridge the gap.
And to be able to say to Kyle, take your databases and take them to the ministry, and let's add them in that way, so that we can really kind of get a number. Or we can take the databases that we've identified, or the ones that JBDC.
And then to say how can they be used in the industry. So, what is publicly available, which is where it would really come in handy, so that you could, persons who need the services, who need to interact, who need this type of level of collaboration can do so. So, for example, of course, this project has an element of EU Jamaica cooperation, and I didn't get into the database that's actually mapping that, because that's also an important aspect of the database that has wider considerations. There are databases that connect South-South that do have exactly that. And so, for example, if you want to do a collaborative partnership with entities, you can go on there and you can learn about those entities. You can click on them and you can get straight to them. Excellent. So that does exist. So for example, with the ACP Cultures Plus, so in our first, we had a webinar on the 22nd of February, and in that, this kind of Cultures Plus database was spoken about. Because it is a really handy tool.
Yes, necessary.
Yeah. And in the European space, Comediae manages a platform called Culture Agora, which is an agora, which is a place where people can connect in that way and put opportunities. And so if there's a call for production, it would go there, and then you'd be able to access it. So I mean, platforms are very important, and it should be a part of any kind of plan to make an accessible platform. So platforms exist, databases exist, but how we get them to connect to really be able to impact the enabling.
So we're on the same word.
Yeah.
So to be fair, the plans that came out in our discussions with Kingston Creative,
yes.
Who they're in the process of creating a database and have indicated that it's a database that will be public, the information on it,
That's
people
true,
through
yes.
permission. And then there's the issues that came up yesterday about the new legislation that is regulating databases, that we need to be, kind of careful about how we're doing the regulation of database. But that's a whole area
Right.
of discussion, and it has to be included in the legislation. And it, the interface between that legislation and
it needs to be
and the
protected
data
too.
protection
Yeah.
legislation.
Yes,
So
yes.
there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of in this formalization process that we're talking about.
Yeah,
So
and
what I'm hearing is that, and you said it earlier, Deborah, you said it's a new day and times are changing. And I'm super excited about that because I've been maybe on the sidelines, but waiting for the change. Change is going to come. How have you found this process so far, the journey of the mapping? I know we're at the end now. Today is the final event that you're having. How has the journey been so far on this discovery of what you've undertaken thus far?
Oh, it has been an adventure, to say the least. It has been an adventure. Channeling the deep waters of Jamaica's creative ecosystem, takes you in some very interesting directions and up to some very beautiful shores. And I do believe that it's a colorful and vibrant ecosystem, one that is filled with all of these wonderful things happening. One of the things, though, is that you end up having duplication of efforts across the sector a lot, and we find that is one of the things. And it's, with the limited resources that we have, when you come up against these things and you see that, okay, the same resources, the limited resources are being used in the same areas for the same tasks, and they're not speaking to each other. Exactly, not speaking to each other.
To be fair, again, this issue of information is really so very critical.
Data protection.
The minister indicated that there are these 5 major projects that are being overseen by her minister that are going to feed into her ministry, and there is a process of coordination between these projects that is going to happen. So again, that's something that we're looking forward to. So we don't have the duplication of effort, so that we don't have the wastage of resources. We spoke yesterday about a set of audits that needs to be done. There's a public sector audit that needs to happen in terms of the human resources that are being used in the area, and how could they be sorted through. There's an audit that needs to happen about education and all the various curricula that are being developed, what's happening in Edna and Hart and the primary schools, and how does that matriculate into the high schools to get a master's, and how are the pieces. Is there a plan to develop, instead of developing a BA, you're developing an MFA? And all of our, individuals were talking about some of these things yesterday in one of the sessions. There's a full set of auditing that needs to happen. Auditing of infrastructure came up today. So.
All right, so I am salivating. I don't know if you've gathered that. I'm salivating thus far because I think these are conversations that I have been having in my bedroom, which is irrelevant. I shouldn't have been having it there. So you've highlighted these areas or these gaps or this redoing the same work. What is next? What is next for you guys? What's the next step, the next level? What can we look forward to coming from the KNOC going forward?
We're writing it up. We're writing it up and then we'll see.
Okay. Okay.
We're writing it up and we are, you know, getting it published and getting it circulated, and then we'll see. There's, like I said, there's so much work to do. There's not enough hands to do the kind of work we're doing.
Right.
And, you know, we're talking about the kind of work that happens quietly, behind closed doors, in the quiet of the midnight. You know, it's not a kind of flashy sort of public-facing set of work. There's a lot of work to do.
Lots of work to do. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, I have been having the conversations strongly in my bathroom by myself, you know, in my bedroom by myself. How can persons sign up and be counted in this research process? How can we get involved and stop having the conversations in our little microcosms, our little groups?
So we
and
didn't
take
think
it
we were
to
starting a movement.
I know,
I know. Maybe a movement.
We were doing a little mapping project, right?
Yes, yes.
We didn't.
You started a movement
We
inadvertently.
started a movement, but so we haven't quite, you know, kind of thought that through in terms of there's stand up and be counted. Here's what I would say.
Yeah.
Join your associations. We're counting your associations. And there's value in you joining your associations. You join your associations, you join that advocacy force, you get involved in that process, then you automatically become a part of the databases that we are counting. You automatically become a part of the voices that are going to be, that Kyle, you know, and Kyle and his group are going to be taking to say, these are the things that we want. But if we don't join, if we don't have a ticket, we don't have a chance, yeah?
Love it, love it.
So,
yeah.
you know, it doesn't make sense to sit down and, you know, there's also the flip side of that. I'm sorry, you know, I could talk about this forever.
I'm
right?
loving it. I know everybody is thinking, hello.
There
but
are
I
lots
am
of people who don't want to join nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
They are doing their thing, they are making their money, they are getting on with it, they are touring, they have their money under their mattress or elsewhere, they are doing their round robin and the money, you know, kind of grows as it circulates and so on. And we have to be respectful of that reality too in a different sort of way. So that's where we start to think about rethinking formalization. What does that mean?
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
So
I hear you. I
Yeah.
hear you. So I am so grateful to you both. You see, as a creative, I am the epitome of creative in the sense that I hate researching and administration and all that good stuff. So I know that this research that you guys are doing was, I know it's, lots of work went into it. Is there any
driven by passion, because trust me,
Listen,
otherwise it would not.
I know, I can just imagine. Is there anyone you'd like to thank at this,
Oh,
at
so
this
many,
juncture?
so many people. Go ahead.
The list
You
comes
have
out,
a
we're
list.
ready to go.
Fantastic. I'm so happy that you're prepared.
We want to first start with the European Union. The European Union and a group called the CRP.
Cultural
out of
Relations
Europe.
Platform.
Cultural Relations Platform. Cultural Relations Platform is the intermediary group between between us and the EU. We work with the Cultural Relations Platform in Europe. And you know, it's a small project, but the EU said, go and do it. Let's see what we can do. Go and do the tests, go do the pilots, go see what comes out of it, and let's see where it goes.
Yes,
yes. So we're really, you know, when somebody takes a chance on an idea in an environment like this, we're grateful. Yeah. The ambassador and the charge and a woman named Virginie in the European Union, who in the delegation, who has been there holding our hands and plodding through the process with us. We want to thank Ministers Grange Hill, Terrelong, and the mayor. Now, Minister Grange has been at every one of the 3 activities that we've had.
Wow.
Now, I've worked in that sphere. To get a minister to show up and be there and be present and be active every step of the way shows a kind of level of dedication to the processes that you're bringing forth. And I appreciate her for that form of endorsement. Minister Hill, too, he's been at 2. Mainly because the third was not necessarily within his ambit, and Minister Terrelong was able to do 1 or 2 as well.
The first one.
Joanne Archibald, I want to say thank you to her because she is really kind of out of the ministry, and David Brown, they have kind of held our hands and kind of walked us through the process. Lisa Ogilvie, there's a little short girl who walks around this place.
Yeah.
And she puts all the pieces together, and she does all the event planning, and she makes it happen like magic. You can't.
Absolutely
But it's not
amazing.
magic. It means that she
not
don't
magic, it's
sleep,
work, yeah.
right? It means that she just hasn't been sleeping. So I really want to thank her.
Yeah.
I want to thank Mona GIS. I want to thank all the facilitators. We had facilitators from within the industry who participated, who were partners with us. We use, like for example, Marielle Barrow out of Barbados. We used a part of her methodology, Dr. Marielle Barrow, and we used it to kind of augment ours. There were people like Olayinka Jacobs-Bonnick, Andrea Dempster Chung. There was Gillian Wilkins McDaniel and Harold Davis,
Kerry.
who were there with us step by step. Kerry.
Yes.
Kerry as well. Kerry Ann, who was here a little earlier. And, you know, they helped us to tease out the ideas and get the things working. We had partners. Lots of partners.
Yes, lots of partners there.
Your turn, Stephanie. Your turn.
Headline.
No, man, take it away. I applaud. I'm doing the round of applause, you know.
We had
as
lots
it
of
goes.
panelists.
Yes.
We had panelists over 3 events. Panelists from far and near. Panelists from the ACP, the very head of, you know, the deputy head of ACP. Now, you know, that's for him to have
beautiful.
taken time to come and talk to us
Beautiful.
about our little industry. That, you know, that was important. We had scholars and practitioners and people who to help us kind of hone the
People in
ideas.
the financial
So
industry.
that was, financial industry. Oh, Mariam Robinson
Excellent.
from, you know, oh my goodness.
I'm
teams.
understanding your struggle.
Yeah.
I feel there's so many persons to thank.
Yes, you know.
Where do I stop?
Yeah, our team, no man, we're calling name. We call some of the name, at least the groups. The Committee I team. Now we're on air because of Committee I. We're on, I mean, they've facilitated us with, you know, lots of different types of resources,
Excellent.
especially this one. And Income Vision team, which is a group that has helped us to kind of get hold the pieces together. Caribbean Events Group, AV Solutions, who is here, and they're trying to wrap up, and I'm allowing them to wrap up, and South Collective, Kingston Creative, I Create, Headline, JBDC, and the Ministry, both the Ministries of Commerce and the Ministry of Culture.
And
whole
Foreign
heap
Affairs
more.
too.
Foreign Affairs.
Yes.
Foreign Affairs
Ministry
too.
of Foreign Affairs.
That has
Beautiful.
helped. Whole heap more, you know, and you.
Hey,
Yes.
hey, hey.
And whole
Thanks
heap
for
more,
jumping in.
and I know that I
Yes.
don't remember somebody, but forgive me.
Yes.
We are appreciative.
Yes,
So
the
those are
spirit is
things to
willing
thank.
to remember everybody, but the flesh may be weak. I understand what you're saying. I get it. You want to. Thank you guys so much. I want to thank those who are watching on our online platforms. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to connect with us. Share your thoughts. Like they said, they're going to write up the information, the outcomes right now, and be involved, be a part of that conversation. So again, on Twitter, the handle is NOC_culture. On Facebook and Instagram is at Networks of Culture. So talk to us, talk to them, get the conversation going. Let's keep these two separate entities, bring them together. Yes, let's have the conversations. So hashtag us, hashtag KNOC, hashtag connect the dots, and hashtag networks of culture. I want to thank you guys so much for being a part of this experience with us. I want to thank you so much for today. My name is Nisha Yen Jones, and I had a fabulous, fabulous time. Any closing thoughts?
The University of the West Indies.
See, I knew she had one. I felt
You
it in my
see?
spirit that there
You
was
see?
one more.
If I never
felt
said
it.
Institute of Caribbean Studies,
They would have murdered you.
then no, I
You would have
would cease to be
got you. Got you.
University of the West Indies.
All right, excellent. Stephanie, any final thoughts before we?
Well, I just, you know, it's really been some great energy. You know, every time we get together with stakeholders, you really see that the why is there and the why is in the right place. So, let us break through the trust issues. Let us break through, these kind of barriers that separate us and see really how we can, dot by dot bring things together to kind of build out a more solid and enabling environment for our creatives.
Beautiful.
Lots of work to do.
Beautiful. We have some work to do. And that's a beautiful word to close us out. Thank you guys so much. Again, that's a wrap on our final staging for this time. I'm sure we'll be back. But for this time, connecting the dots, bridging the gap. See you next time. Walk good. Blessings.